Welcome to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where we, as married busy professionals, leverage real estate investing to unlock the 3+1 degrees of freedom: health, location, time, and financial.
Today, we've got a power couple in the house. We've got Emma and Troy Powell. Thank you guys for coming on the show. How are you today?
Doing great, thanks.
Awesome. Good to have you on the show. And for those listeners who are just now getting to know Emma and Troy, they are experienced real estate investors, general managers, capital raisers, loan guarantors, and owners of High Rise Group, alongside her husband, Emma's husband of 25 years, Troy. They've lived together and partnered on nearly 500 units and recently relocated to Salt Lake City back in 2018 after living 20 years in Austin, Texas, which is an amazing town, by the way. My wife is from Austin, so shout out to Austin. They have extensive property management and construction management experience. Emma's favorite part of investing, other than the passive cash flow, is creatively getting transactions across the finish line. And then, of course, you guys have a family. You've got 6 homeschooled kids with wide ranges of ages from 24 to 10. So it's a very busy household. First of all, welcome to the show. And secondly, can you guys give us a little bit of the history about how you found real estate investing and how it got you excited and how it ended you up here today?
So I've told the origin story a lot of times. I'm actually interested to hear it from his perspective. This is his first interview. So you want to take the background story? And
sure, it probably differs from what hers is.
Oh yeah.
But we had done some house hacking in Texas, where we would move into a new neighborhood, try to buy the smallest house that we could in the neighborhood and be one of the first ones in there, and then let the builders drive up the value of our house. And then we'd live there for 5 or 6 years, and then we would move to another neighborhood, and we did that 2 or 3 times while we were down there. And then our last home, we decided that we wanted to move into a fixer-upper, remodel it, which we did, and ended up adding probably about $200,000 in equity in the house before we moved up here to Utah. And so my job, I worked for tech startups, and we decided to move up to Utah and work for some of the medical startups. So I ended up finding a company up here, but one of the criteria was that we had to move to a city that had a rugby team. So, so Utah ended up being one of those. So we have family up here. And so that's kind of what drew us up here to Utah initially. And when we got up here, Emma had been running her own business down in Texas, doing real estate photography and wedding photography. And she didn't want to try and start the business up again. It was just too much work, too much effort to get it up and running.
Not passive.
Yeah, not passive.
Yeah.
And so I'd been paying a mortgage my entire life. And so I told her, well, it's not going to change. I'm still paying a mortgage. So let's not throw all that money at our house. Just take the money and do whatever you need to do with it and start your own business, whether it's real estate or whatever you want to do. And so she did. And I was super excited that she decided to do real estate with that. And then her goal when she told me that she wanted to start it was that she wanted to be able to replace my income so that we didn't ever have to worry about having a single income and losing the ability to provide for our family because of somebody else's decision. And
tech startup layoffs.
Yeah. So
yes.
So she jumped into it. She wanted to get into large multifamily right away, but we had no idea how to do that. And so we went to all the local meetups, went to different people presenting things. We thought it was ridiculous that they wanted to charge hundreds of thousands of dollars for you to go and learn how to do all of this, where all the information is free on the internet if you know where to look. We didn't know where to look, but we also didn't want to pay that money to somebody else for them to just teach us and then still not have a deal completed when we were done with it. And so our goal has been throughout this whole process is to learn about everything and to try and remove those barriers to entry for anybody else, whether it's family or friends or anybody that we can find that will listen to us, to show them how to get into real estate investing. And so,
not very many people listen, and it's kind of funny. It's always the outside network that pays more attention and has more respect, and the family and friends are like, oh, I hope you don't go bankrupt.
Yeah, it's really funny how that works out. I can totally relate with that. Thank you very much, Troy, for sharing that story here. But I actually want to back up a little bit before that too, because you guys got into the transition into multifamily when you guys made the move from Texas to Utah. But what you started off with is that you guys did some house hacks in Texas, if I remember hearing that correctly, right? So that means that before you guys got interested in multifamily real estate, there was some interest in real estate at the beginning. Can you guys talk about what that conversation looked like when you first, either one of you approached the real estate side and said, hey, we should start looking at house hacking or looking at real estate as an investment from the beginning, from the get-go?
Back then, nobody called it house hacking. It's not technically house hacking because that would be turning a liability, as Kiyosaki calls it. Your house is not an asset, it's a liability. And so house hacking is all about changing that liability into something that cash flows. And so I think technically that's not what we were doing. What we were doing was enjoying forced equity. Like I said, those terms, we had never heard those terms before. I mean, the internet, when we bought our first house, had like 4 websites on it. So there just wasn't a lot out there as long as that goes. But my parents had done lease options on their homes when I was growing up, and I didn't know a whole lot about it. I was one of the younger kids, but I would hear them discussing it. So a little bit of osmosis. And I knew when I was about 10, I asked my mom like what my grandparents did for a living, and she said they were retired, and I didn't know what that meant. And I was like, well, how do you retire? How do you not work for money? And she said that he had an Air Force pension. He flew bombers in World War II for the Canadian Air Force. And he had made $1 million in the stock market and was living off of that. And as a 10-year-old, I was like, wait, what? Like, you can make money and get money without working? And that always stuck with me. I remember a job interview I was doing in college where they asked why I wanted to work there. And I said, it was a summer job. And I said, I really want to make as much money as I can to set it inside and get it invested as residual income. And back then I had never heard the term passive income. Invested as residual income so that I can go to school and not have to worry about money during the school year. And he said, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that when I ask them why they want the job. And that was when I realized that this is what everybody wanted and what everybody talks about. Oh, you get $1 million and live off your dividends. You'd hear that every once in a while, but nobody was actually doing it. And so I spent the next couple of decades just trying to figure out the stock market. Because I mean, my grandpa made $1 million in the stock market. So can I, but every time I tried, it was just a train wreck. I didn't actually like it. I was kind of understanding what was going on, but it was just a lot of charts and numbers and not that interesting. We even had some friends who manage hedge funds or run their own publicly traded mutual funds. And we talk to them and they try to get us excited about it and explain what a PE ratio is. And I tried so hard and I just never really did it. And I decided that we needed some rental houses. Everybody had a few rental houses, but I looked at them as kind of a burden. That your tenants, everybody I knew who had rentals, tenants were annoying and they'd call you and they'd need something and, oh, there's a flood or there's a fire or there's a fight. And they would just complain about any time they had to go and manage the rental properties. And so I was kind of psyching myself up for it. Like, if I'm going to make money off of these, I'm going to treat them like a job. If you have to go into work, so they will pay you money. Nobody sits around and complains about how they're getting paid. They maybe not like the job and they don't want to work, but at the end of the day, you recognize you have to work for your money. And so there was some middle ground between just passive or residual income and working for your money. And I felt like that was rental homes. They're pretty passive, but every time a tenant calls or needs something or goes vacant, get up and go to work and stop complaining about it. These people are paying down your mortgage. And if you've done it correctly, there's left over to pay your bills. And so I was approaching it from a more practical job standpoint, but we just never had enough money. We were just working away and I was doing my little photography thing and we had a lot of kids and their lives were passing by and we wanted to take them on vacation and do some things before they were too old and moved out. And we just never had enough money. And then we moved to Salt Lake. It turned our whole lives upside down. And I had to figure out new ways to do things and change my mindset and my relationship to debt. I still don't think there's good debt and bad debt. I think all debt is frightening and risky, but that it can be managed with the right tools and the right knowledge. And there's a practical standpoint where you can use debt without overusing debt, without over leveraging, and be responsible with it. So that relationship had to change. And that was really what happened at the beginning of our real estate journey. We took the cash that we made off of our Texas house because we forced value into it. And he did a lot of the work himself. And so we basically had a lot of value in there for a lot of sweat equity. And we took that and we said, okay, well, we're just going to rent a house in Salt Lake because we don't know anything about the area. And we're going to take all of that cash. We're going to pay cash for one rental, which was like a townhome. And we very quickly realized, well, what if we got a mortgage on the townhome and took what was left over and went and put a down payment on another townhome? And then that was a very scary thought for me, because no, debt's bad. We're going to pay cash for our rentals, Dave Ramsey land.
Yeah.
And when we finally got to that point, I realized we made all this money in real estate from buying new neighborhoods, that forced equity of the builder and putting up with the construction and the noise and the trash, driving over nails every day. And we put up with that and that forced equity into that raw land, and then forcing equity into our fixer upper. I took this pile of cash and I said, I made this in real estate. And that realization that this was money that we could go do real things with, that we made in real estate, that wasn't from our jobs. We spent that. And that was really where the turning point came from. And I said, I really need to start buying rentals, and immediately landed on multifamily, because he grew up in a college town where a bunch of his neighbors owned small apartment buildings for student housing. And so to me, that seemed like just a natural progression. Like, well, we knew all these people who had little apartments and we should look at that. So that's really how we transitioned from house hacking into commercial real estate.
That's awesome. And I can tell just by the language that you guys are using that you have different approaches to this type of endeavor, right? I think you both are correct, and there's no wrong way to look at the situation and how to look at a problem and solve it. But I had to note too that the theme of this podcast is going to be kind of this power couple working together in areas that they are strong in. And one thing I picked up on too, from Troy's point of view, is that Troy helped create all of that, the sweat equity in the beginning, right? To make that all happen. So Troy, you also understood too that there's a component of this forced equity piece that's really going to be important. You don't know how it's going to work out. Like, it's just going to trade off to another property later on. And then being able to use Emma's vision to take that equity and then multiply it using debt ever begrudgingly. I think that that's a super powerful thing, and kind of like a microcosm of what you guys are doing today, right?
That's true. I mean, I was approaching it very differently from her. Like when we were moving out of our first house, that I was like, this is a great house, great neighborhood, right? Why are we moving? And the argument was that, we need to move into a different neighborhood with to have a bigger house so we can support a larger family, so that we can get equity on our house and force the equity. So I asked her the question. I'm like, okay, well, if we move into this larger house, we won't have money to go do fun stuff like, go on trips and buy bicycles and stuff for our kids, right?
House poor.
Yeah. So I was like, we're going to be house poor if we move there. And so she's like, well, I feel like this is a thing we need to do. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. And so we continued to scrimp and save, and we moved to a new place, and we continued to scrimp and save there, and it paid off, right? And that's the reason that I'm so glad to have her, is because she has the force to be able to say, let's hold off on this stuff now. We'll have time later to do that. And so that's really been a blessing.
And trying to treat the house as an investment, because you hear every once in a while they say the greatest source of wealth for most Americans is their home. And so we were taking like these little bits and pieces of half information and putting them together and cobbling them together in a way that made sense to us. But I think where we really turned the corner is when, we found bigger pockets in RIA organizations, and we started networking with like-minded people. Instead of scrambling around in the half dark with these half ideas, we were able to put them together into a cohesive plan. And I think that's really where we saw the difference. Because before we looking back, we did a lot of the right things. As far as the way I explain it, it's like when you get a new job and they give you a raise, and then you get these little cost of living raises in between, but you're never going to do as well as if you leap to a new job, into a new pay grade. It's like houses are like that. We're going to go in and they're going to go up in value the fastest right after they're built, or either right after they're remodeled, because I didn't know it was called forced appreciation. But that's the way I explained it to him. So we knew these things and we did some of these things correct. But then looking back at it too, there were so many things that we did wrong and stupid that slowed us down. And so when we finally got the right network of people and we were ready to hear what they were saying, that's when things really did the hockey stick returns going up.
Of course, man, I see so much of our story in you guys as well. It's just crazy. And so we can talk about that a little bit later on, but I want to start moving towards the conversations that you guys are having at home while you're building this thing up on the multifamily side. Because a couple minutes ago, we've been talking about, mostly getting to the point where you are up to multifamily, but let's talk about multifamily right now. So you guys just moved to Salt Lake. It's 2018. Emma, you have the situation right now where you have some excess capital, And Troy has basically said, let's go ahead and do something with it. Let's do something in real estate with it. Can you talk a little bit about what those early conversations were like? Was there any pushback? Was there discussion? Because I know that there are gurus out there that you have to pay, and there's mastermind groups and stuff like that. And sometimes it's worth it, but let's talk about what was happening at home.
I think the most difficult part was, where do you put the money? How do you know who to trust? Who's going to give you the best return on your money? The naivety that we had, we were looking at, hey, if we can get like an 8% return on our money, that's going to be awesome, right? And everybody's like, yeah, I'll give you an 8% return,
exactly.
Right? Because they're all getting like 20% returns and everything.
Yeah.
They're happy to. They wouldn't tell us that, hey, I can get you a better return than that. I'll tell you what, you loan me the money and I'll get you like 18%, right? Nobody's saying that.
No, because they were happy that we thought 10% sounded like a scam.
Yeah, exactly.
And now it's like, if I was doing 10%, I'd be like, I can do better.
Yeah,
but back then it sounded like, oh, it's too good to be true. It probably is. Well, that advice did not serve us well because we didn't research what the prevailing rates were for doing hard money loans and all that. And so a lot of just ignorance on our part pervaded these conversations. If we had recorded and we go back and listen to them, I bet we would just be laughing about all this basically ignorant things that we said. And so, naive. But I know that I did spend a big chunk of money, about 50 grand on, I guess like a lease option licensing program, like branding and franchising type of thing. And it ended up not being a good fit for me. It was kind of more like wholesaling, but I was determined to make my money back from at least break even on that. And so I did a couple of deals and broke even on that. And that was an extremely difficult conversation because I was so waffling on the fence, back and forth. And he didn't really know what to tell me to do because it was a lot of money. And I finally went and pulled the trigger on it. And it ended up in the long run being a good thing. But in the short run, it really felt like I had made a mistake. And those conversations were really difficult because it's like the blind leading the blind in that situation. But I think for you, you looked at this money as monopoly money at that point.
I pretty much just wrote it off from the very beginning. I'm like, money that she made, house hacking down in Texas.
Well, I mean, he did all the DIY
right. Well, I
labor,
did. But yeah, so I looked at it as if she went and got an education, like if she went back to school and got an education, she'd be spending hundreds of thousands of dollars anyway doing that. I'm like, so I figured that this is her education and however she wants to spend it, she'll learn what she needs to one way or another.
Tell the story about the first time I called you on the phone to tell you I lost money. Like the first time I lost money.
There's no tears involved in this.
No. So what you said is you're kind of coaching me through that embarrassment and that reluctance to tell him what had happened, because at this point it was pretty well understood that even though we made the money in real estate, that was being earmarked monopoly money for a real estate business. And at that point I had pretty much taken over and he was in a new job and really focusing on getting his skills up to par for that one. And so I called him up and I said, hey, I just lost $5,000 by putting down earnest money on a wholesale before I did my due diligence, and it's non-refundable. It's gone. Like 5 minutes later, I called the title company and they're like, sorry, you're done. And do you remember what you said?
No.
You don't remember what you said?
I was like, oh, well.
Yeah, it was such a non-issue. He doesn't even, you barely remember it. And he said, like, thank you for telling me, because I told him I was too embarrassed to call. And I knew that was the sign that I needed to call. And he said something along the lines of, yeah, it sucks. I'm sorry that you lost money, and commiserating with me a little bit. And he's just, I know you'll make it back. And that's true. I mean, it was $5,000 at the time. It felt like a lot of money, but now it feels like chump change. And we had a deal go bad last year where I lost $70,000. And I don't think he said one word about it.
Yeah.
Just like, oh, what'd you learn? Maybe, I don't know. It was just a complete non-issue. He knows that I made a lot more than I lost last year. And for him, it's just like, out of sight, out of mind. This was earmarked to do this. And if we lose everything, whatever, he still has his job and his knowledge base. And so he's been very supportive that way and pushing me to grow and saying, hey, can you get 100 doors? Can you get 1,000 doors? Can you do a deal using zero of your own money? And those kinds of challenges, because he comes to the meetings and the conferences and all of that. And he is learning a lot by osmosis, and he's able to put that out there and help me push myself more, but at the same time with zero judgment, zero recrimination. And I think the key to that is that money was earmarked for a specific purpose. And it's definitely getting used for that, whether we make money on it or we lose it all. I'm certainly gaining an education.
Do you guys have any advice for those out there who maybe aren't at your level to be able to react the way that you guys did in a situation like that? Because I see a lot of people out there who maybe get involved and maybe aren't on the same page with their spouse, and they're off doing these things and they don't have the support and they haven't worked on that core piece. What advice would you have for those folks?
Well, I think it's, have you ever heard the term, don't ever lend family money if you don't, if you plan on getting it back?
It's a
So,
gift. It's a gift.
Yeah. So
Make it
it's
a
a
gift.
gift. Yes. So it doesn't matter how much money you give that person. If you plan on never giving it back, your relationship will stay intact and you'll have good feelings from each other, forever. The person that you loan the money to might feel obligated or guilty, but, as long as you let them know that, hey, it's okay, it's not a big deal. And it's kind of the same way with this right here, right? We've been investing this money all the time. It was tied up in our house. We never really saw it until we cashed out and moved up to Utah. And so to me, it was still play money, right? I was like, I'm still doing my 9-to-5 job. I'm still getting paid. I'm still paying the bills. Nothing's really changed. And so to me, I didn't really even consider the money as something that I had.
It's a big thing to have that perspective, right? Rather than looking at someone losing money, it's an education piece. It's on this continuum. It's a mistake that you're making an investment that you'll never do again. It's kind of like the stupid tax concept with Dave Ramsey, right? Which I have a feeling you guys are big followers, or used to be big followers of Dave Ramsey, and me too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I totally get that.
I was going to say, so I think the key is that if you've already planned on having access to that money and that you've already earmarked it for a purpose, that it doesn't really matter what happens as that money accomplishes its purpose. As long as you've written it off, then there's no reason to argue about it because it's already, it's already performing.
It's
what it
already
needs to.
spent at that point.
Exactly.
Mentally. Your emotional attachment to it is already spent.
I love that. And also the fact too, that money is gone. One party already feels bad about it and they're trying their best and they're doing something. And then the other party is going to try to make it worse by making them feel guilty or shaming them or doing something like that. Just doesn't make any sense. And I think that's the spirit of entrepreneurship and partnership that a power couple really exudes. And so the fact that, Troy, you don't even remember what was said in that situation, and Emma, you were so thankful for his response and that you remember that so viscerally, really points to the fact that you guys have a really strong foundation to build off of. That being said, you guys, because you have this strong foundation, can you guys talk a little bit about how this real estate investing stuff maybe altered your relationship? Has it gotten better? Has it added a layer of communication? Just reflecting on that right now, does anything come to mind?
I have told this story before, but it's a little bit embarrassing for me. When I had decided to go back to school and get my bachelor's degree, it was this awesome program that my alma mater, where I had my associate's degree, was doing. If you tried out their online program, huge tuition reduction. And I was looking at it, I was like, I'd be kind of stupid to not do this. I can fit it in between, the business and all that. And he didn't quite understand what was going on and why I was choosing to take on added stress. I tend to overextend myself. And looking back on it, was all an attempt to have to do less housework, right? But he thought that if I gave up these things, then I could get the house taken care of the way that I wanted it to be. And I finally realized one day, it doesn't matter how much of the stuff I give up, I'm not doing more housework. And so I decided to go to school, and he was just like, I just understand why you're taking on the stress. He said, you already have a successful business. If you wanted to scale up the photography business, you could be making at least, what I'm making. And I said, yeah, but it takes a while to scale up a business. And I just wanted the insurance in my back pocket. If I ever needed to go get a job for whatever reason, that I could apply for lots of jobs that required bachelor's degrees. And he said, well, if something happened to him, you never know, just making backup plans, right? And he still was kind of pushing back and not understanding why I was doing it. I finally looked at him and I said, look, I want you to know that I can divorce you at any minute. And the only reason I'm here is because I like you.
Wow. Okay. That's clear.
I never wanted to feel trapped, like I was only with him for financial reasons because I had no other options, because that will erode a relationship. And when you know that you're together because you love each other and you actually like spending time together, it changes the relationship dramatically.
Did you learn anything from that, Troy? Or I'm just wondering, like, what was going through your head when that conversation was going on?
Well, to me, it was the way I understood it was, hey, you need to just back off because I won't know what my limits are until I hit those, right? And so when I would see her getting stressed out and overwhelmed, I was trying to remove stuff off of her plate to try and help her, right? But in reality, it was, she needed to find out where her limits were so that she could understand, when do I need to start dialing back.
Mhm.
But yeah, to me, it doesn't really matter. I mean, we've had issues. We've had instances where she needed to go to this conference and I couldn't join her. And one of our male friends offered to give her a ride over there and even like stay in, and share a hotel room with her. I was like, hey, that sounds fine. And, and she's like, what? Seriously? You okay with that? And I was like, well, if she thinks she can do better, then go for it.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy. Wow.
I was like, I am not afraid. She is more than capable of making her own decisions, and I'm not going to do that for her.
And
So.
and that wasn't coming from a place where she can't possibly do better than me. It was coming from a place of, if she really can do better, I wish her well.
Exactly.
And that genuine feeling of really wanting what's best for the other one. I would say the turning point in that relationship came from when we were reading Nonviolent Communication. It was recommended to us very commonly in our homeschooling groups, especially the unschooling groups, where we were trying to learn how to not micromanage our kids' education and control them, and just how to let things go. And our son has a type of autism called pathological demand avoidance, meaning that he's very difficult to steer and does things his own way. And there's just not a lot you can do about it. And so we read Nonviolent Communication together. We read it as a family on audiobook on a road trip. And the core lesson coming out of that is you can't control anyone. You can only communicate how you feel, and you can't even control if they hear you or even understand you. And it became apparent when we had arrived at our destination on the road trip, and I wanted him to come and play games with some of my family members. We were visiting my sister, and he said, I don't want to come play games. I'm watching a movie with the kids. I said, yeah, but my brother's here and everybody's here and you're the only adult in here with the kids. And it's just weird. It's awkward. I feel awkward about it. And he said, I don't want to play board games. I want to watch movies with the kids. And I said, yeah, but I asked you really nicely. And I explained myself in a nonviolent way. And I communicated clearly what I want. And he said, thank you. You still can't control what I do. And I've decided that I'm going, and me just standing there and realizing, oh, I can ask as nicely as I want. I can explain as clearly as I want. And he still doesn't have to do. I could bully him into this. I could start trying to browbeat and all that. And he could just get upset and it could turn into that. But when I realized all I can do is communicate clearly and everybody else can do what they want. And that applies to my children. It applies to him. It applies to my business partners. That was a major turning point for me in learning to control what I can control and doing it with skill, a capable skill. And what I cannot control, I just don't think about it anymore. I just put it out of my mind because there's no use stressing over it.
Yeah, I think that's some incredibly useful wisdom for just everyone walking around in general. And I can tell that is kind of like a liberating understanding, right? Like, because even though you maybe are acknowledging that you have less control over situations outside of you, you're actually removing that false boundary, that you think is a boundary, but it's not there. It's just you're expecting things of other people. And it's kind of like a liberating concept. So thank you for sharing that with us. A great story. But I do have a couple more questions for you guys. And now that we've talked a lot about the foundation, we know that that's solid. You guys are your own adults individually making decisions on your own that are the benefit of each other, and you like what you do, which I really love. Let's talk about scaling up, because you guys right now have partnered on over 500 units, and right now you're at a point in your business where it's kind of hockey sticked, and you have earned the luxury of being able to choose who you want to be in business with and when you want to be in business, right? So let's talk about how you scaled. Talk about the early part of that hockey stick going up. What were some key things that you guys learned or went through together to make that happen in your marriage and also in your business?
So initially, like I said, we were trying to look into getting into a large multifamily right away, but we had no idea how to enter that arena. And so we started with what we knew how to do, which was basically house hack. Find a house, fix it up, turn it into a rental, get it cash flowing for us as quick as we possibly could. So at first we were just looking for a number of those, and we started looking at duplexes and triplexes and trying to find ways to do that. And we were doing that as quick as we could with the money that we had until we ran out of down payment money. And so once we had no more down payment money, I said to my wife, I was like, this is awesome. I am so excited that you finally ran out of money, because she felt like she needed to own the project by herself. And I said, but all these multifamily people are telling us that you don't need any money in order to get into large multifamily. And I said, so now that you don't have any money, let's do that. And so she's like, oh, great. So she started looking into what that involved. And one of the things that people had mentioned was that if you find the money, you don't need to have any money. If you can find the deal, you don't need to have any money, right? And so she said, well, I don't really know a lot of people yet that I can get money from.
There was no money finding going
yeah.
on.
So she said, well, let me see if I can find a deal. And so she found a deal that looked pretty good. And we were still pretty new on being able to analyze it and to find out if it was actually a good deal. And so she reached out to somebody that she had met in one of the meetups, asked him if he would go over the deal with her and see if it was a good deal. And he looked it all over and ran the numbers and everything and said, this is a good deal. And do you need help raising money for it? And she said, yes.
Which was why he was
Nice.
going around offering people to do free deal analysis. It's because he was looking for an opportunity.
Oh,
So
yeah.
it was one of
Mhm.
I'm going to work for free. And he had always told me, if you find something, I'm happy to run the financials and teach you how to do it. And that was really the basis of our first deal. And we had a couple deals that we tried to do before that we ended up not buying. One was a 220 unit development just outside of his hometown. And I just didn't have the network I needed to close that. And now it's kind of funny because I know the guy who actually bought it and he's doing a great job with it. But we met because of that failed. I looked him up in the registers to see if that had traded hands, because now I feel more capable of doing it. I said, let me go see if that piece of land's still available. And sure enough, it wasn't. He bought it and he's running it, but then we're talking about doing a deal together. So even those failures of things where we tried to do it and we didn't have the right people, didn't have the right knowledge, didn't have the right network, have actually been great learning experiences. And for most of them, we didn't have any money in it. We didn't lose any money. We just learned and it was great. A few of them, we had some money in, we lost the money, but that poised us to be able to deliver on the first deal. We still weren't quite ready. We still needed a lot of help, a lot of learning, a lot of more knowledge base than we had, but we had the right people where together we could join forces and get some things done. So I don't look at the failures as failures. They were definitely valuable experiences.
Yeah, I would say that they're just part of the journey, right? And I think, that's exactly how I kind of started to. That's why I'm loving this, because almost everything that you guys say and on all of your answers, I see a little bit of my wife and I in you guys and what you guys have done. I love the answer that basically it boils down to, once you came away from the idea, just like what Troy was talking about, of trying to do everything yourself and being the lone wolf, to becoming part of the pack, right? And attracting people that you like, that you found that you want to work with. That's when things start to really scale, is you start to remove some of those limitations, right? So that you're not having to do everything yourself and you have more throughput, more capacity. So I think that's a really great takeaway for the listeners out there.
Well, I want to add to that too, that sometimes we tried to do deals that didn't work out. Sometimes they were just experience. Sometimes we lost money. We've also had partners that didn't work out. And so sometimes you say you're scared of partners for that reason, but when you can overcome that fear and start doing work with partners, that doesn't mean that they're all going to be great partners and it's all going to work out. You're going to look at those opportunities where you were successful and also where you failed, learn from it. And you're not going to just throw the baby out with the bathwater. You want to continue to do deals and partnerships, but when things are going right or things are going wrong, if you're always analyzing and you're always just observing and thinking, what would I do? It's kind of like defensive driving. Then you're able to learn a lot from partnerships that went well and learn a lot from partnerships that did not go well. And I've really had very few instances where I've been burned by partners. Sometimes it's just, you're just like, this isn't a great fit. We did well together, but we're not. It's like dating someone that you decide not to marry. And I think that that's important, that we talk about how sometimes deals go wrong, but then we talk about how great partnerships are without really exploring the flip side of that, about how sometimes there's as much to learn from a failed partnership as there is from a failed deal.
100%. And another thing I wanted to add on to that, because it's a great message, is this is where your spouse yet again can come in with more power. Because For me, right, like, I don't know, women have the tendency to be more intuitive and pick up on red flags better than men can. I'm not saying that always happens, but as a general rule, that's how it is. And even if you don't, right, two heads are better than one. And if you bring your spouse into an early partnership discussion with someone you haven't worked with before, or maybe someone that you have on a deal that was iffy, having your spouse there to help explain to you, look, you have been extremely unhappy in this deal, and bringing that awareness of like the blind spots, or he said something, back when we were sitting down with dinner that one time that just like, where did that come from?
Yeah.
And those red flags are huge indicators, things that you could never pick up on that only your spouse can. And even in deals or in partnerships where they're not even involved and they're just seeing you react to it, their feedback on just observing you while in that partnership or in that deal can be extremely valuable feedback.
That's
Well,
true.
he also brings an operational mindset to this that I tend to not have. I try to be operational, I try to be detail oriented, but it's one of those weaknesses that I'm always chasing. It's never going to be a strength. The best I can do is hope that it's not going to bring me down in the end, like minimum standard. But he's more operationally minded. And so he'll be listening in on a meeting and he'll lean over and say, like, is it in writing? Or did he pull a ticket, like a service ticket because of his IT background? And so he's been instrumental in teaching me how to not only think in a more operational way, but also if I'm not doing the operations, how to manage my operators and the standards and procedures that we're going to put into place to make this successful. And I don't think that would come out of me naturally. If I could just fly at 50,000 feet and kind of see at a blurry level what's going on, that's where I would be happiest. And he has to tether me a little bit and say, hey, the day-to-day operations are very important, and training me on what that looks like.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that a little bit has rubbed off vice versa, right, Troy?
Oh yeah. I've had to
sometimes painfully.
yeah
Yeah.
listen passively to all the discussion that she's having, and the meetups and stuff that we go to, because she's okay drinking from a fire hose, but I have a little harder time doing that. So yeah, I learn a little bit more passively, and sometimes surprise myself on what I've actually learned from just passive listening. So
yeah, sometimes he'll start talking to someone, I'll overhear it, and I'll think, oh, so during all those meetings, you weren't just eating all the chips and salsa. He was getting something out.
Yeah, I mean, if you hear a message 10 times, eventually you're going to pick up half of it, and then you're going to continue to get that. So yeah, awesome. So last question I have before we head into the rapid round here and then wrap up the show today. Okay. What do you guys attribute to the longevity in business? Like how are you guys able to sustain doing all this with the family? Clearly you guys are busy. Is there anything that comes to mind in keeping everything going and keeping it all together?
I think keeping your goals in mind and what you're shooting for, you never want to make a goal of making money, right? Because that goal will never end and you'll never have enough, right? Is that the goals that you need to have are to not only benefit you, but to benefit those around you, to help improve yourself. And as long as you're still doing that and that you're focused on, one of our goals is she would like to retire me from my job, even though I like to work, and that may never happen. But the fact is, is that our goal is to spend more time together. That's what it ends up being. If she's able to retire me and I can work wherever I want, and I can, let go of the job that I feel like I'm tied to, having the goal in mind that we're just trying to spend more time together, whether that's on vacations, whether that's working together, that's our ultimate goal. And
he means spend more time together in Portugal. That's what he means.
Yes, I highly recommend it. I'll have to tell you guys a little bit more about our adventures after this, but that makes sense. Anything that you want to add to that, Emma, in terms of longevity of the business?
It's huge. It's little drops in a bucket. It's day by day. I would say the communication is key, but then defining what that communication means. Again, we were talking about learning that you can communicate clearly and the other person you still don't have control of it. That person was huge. And another one is just there's a middle ground from the book. Crucial Conversations really was another game changer for me, because my way of communicating was a little bit of a steamroller. And he would often say things like, if it's more important to you to be right, then you win. And that always sat uncomfortably with me because I didn't feel like I was there to try to win, but he felt like I was there to try to win. And if I was winning, he was losing. And it was this really toxic dynamic. And so being able to go into it and say, I just need to explain myself. I need to tell you where I'm coming from. And I need you to say, I hear you. And vice versa. When he comes and he says, hey, what you're doing here, and getting out of that win-lose mindset was another massive shift. I'm just negotiating because we have to come to an agreement here. Are we living in Portugal or are we staying in Utah? Like, it's not like I win if we get to move to Portugal and he loses if we go there. It's more like, how can we make this work? How can we make sure we're getting as much of what each of us wants, being really keyed into what the other one's goals are. So I can say, okay, I know what my goals are, but how can I use as much of the crossover to reach as many of his goals as possible? And what can I give up? And so that we have that zone of agreement that's where neither one of us are going to get what we want. But like in any negotiation, once you hit that zone of possible agreement, you can then start to make decisions together without trying to control the other one, without trying to win. That was a big turning point for me in communication, defining what healthy communication actually looks like, rather than just that we have good communication, meaning we talk about things and sometimes we yell about them. I thought that was communication, but learning about it, reading about it, going to the masters, I would say negotiation and communication are probably the number one indicator of a strong business partnership, a strong marriage, a strong relationship. And if you're strong in those skills, naturally, great. If not, go learn about them.
Yeah, man, that's such a great takeaway. And I think that both of what you guys are saying are, again, another microcosm of the whole that works, is you have to have a goal to shoot for, but then, like that's what you're saying, Troy. But then for Emma, you're saying that in order to hit that goal, which keeps moving too, by the way, like once you achieve a goal, then you set a new one. You've got to have that communication and the ability to talk with one another and think rationally, right? And come to an agreement and work together as a team. And so I think that communication and the goal setting piece are both really, really important. So thank you guys for that. Great stuff. So let's head into the final segment of the show, which is the rapid round. And I don't know if you guys know this, but it's the same 5 questions that we ask every one of our guests. So if you listen to one of our previous podcasts, then you'll have a leg up here. And so I'm not going to ask you right now if you have, but we'll go ahead and start with number 1. And these questions are meant to be answered in about a 30-second window. Each of you can answer the question. So number 1, what book has had the biggest impact on you and why, outside of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and the Bible? Because we get that all the time.
I'd say The Power of Now.
Oh.
For me.
It's a good one.
And
for me, probably, I mean, I mentioned nonviolent communication and crucial conversations. Those are big ones. But I would put also multipliers in that same category, because I found that the best business books are also the best parenting books. And that one's by actually an intern of the guy who wrote Crucial Conversations, where she talks about the ways that we accidentally diminish one another by micromanaging and giving helpful advice and all of those types of destructive behaviors that we don't realize that we're doing. And then she flips it around on how we can find the genius in everybody, how we can get out of their way, and those types of things. And so as a mother and as a business partner and as a wife, I found that concept to relate to all 3 of those very, very well. And it dovetailed well into the communication books, because here, all its communication is now being actively implemented into a specific action plan.
Love it, man. Great books. Fantastic. Thank you for that. Number 2, if people wanted to emulate your guys' success, what do you think is the first actionable thing that they could do to follow in your footsteps? And that's meant for each one of you.
I think it'd be probably go do her investment club.
Yeah.
Oh,
there you
yeah.
go.
Shameless plug. He's right. See how he just did that?
All of our efforts and everything has kind of led up to this investment club, because we wanted to make a free resource for everybody to be able to learn about the stuff in an open environment, to where they can ask any of the questions that they need to, and have educated professionals there to be able to help them, and they're willing to give their time. And so, I mean, if we had this when we first came into here, we would have gone into multifamily right away.
Yeah.
So since we didn't have that resource,
we fumbled around a little bit more.
Yeah, we spent a lot more time.
Basically, we pool our money as investors, and we apply all the education that we've had, and we go do real deals together. So it lowers the barrier of entry, because we're going in as a pool and we're able to negotiate for better terms, and we're able to negotiate maybe for even a sum of the co-GP to protect that investment. So we're doing real deals on the ground every single week. And I think that the way you're going to learn best is by just taking the leap and doing. And we are just making that leap a lot shorter to get into commercial real estate in a much less demanding way.
That sounds awesome. I definitely was going to give you guys a space to plug at the end, but this is also a really good. a really great tip. I love that. All right, number 3. What is one tool, process, or hack in the last 3 months that has helped you save time and or effort? And that's for
Oh,
each of you.
cards. Note cards. So
Mm.
I'm not very organized. Tried lots of different systems in my life, and I've had periods where I was organized and on top of everything, but having to put things in writing. And recently, I don't know, I've discovered note cards, and I just leave stacks of, buy a 500 pack, and I just leave little stacks of them, and just a couple of locations in my purse, the kitchen drawer, my nightstand, and the kids have access to them. He has access to them. And anytime we think, oh, that's right, I need to check on that tenant, or I need to buy milk at the grocery store, we're able to just jot it down on those note cards. And then once a week I go and I pile up all the cards and I sit at my desk and I just go through them and I rewrite lists, I mark things off. And for me, it's like there's never any excuse that, oh, I'm not near any paper. And taking notes on your phone would be a similar idea, but for whatever reason, that's just never worked for me. There's something about writing it down that solidifies it. So just having little piles of note cards around has been probably my biggest productivity hack recently. I would almost say in some ways it's been life-changing because I feel more organized and productive.
Love that. What about for you?
For me, it's similar. I years ago, I had to decide, or I had to start taking a lot better notes just at work in order to not only protect myself, but also to retain the knowledge that I had, because I work in IT. And so it's an ever-changing environment. And so if I'm not taking notes and reminding myself of things that I've been doing, it's easy to lose track of that information and then have to relearn it all over again. It's been helpful in my business. And so I've been trying to get her to do it in her business. It's also helpful to write down all of your ideas before you go to sleep at night so that the note cards can worry about it. And then that way you can sleep peacefully.
Yep. Brain
I
dump.
love that. And not only that too, but I forgot the name of a book where this was mentioned, but it's one of the great ones. It's either Jim Rohn or like one of the, like getting things done, like one of those books where if you write stuff down and you put the problem down, or maybe even Napoleon Hill, you write the stuff down, your brain and your subconscious will work on it at night. Like your dreams, like what you're doing when you're sleeping, your brain can't help but want to tackle that problem because it's the last thing you've looked at when you went before you go to bed, or at least one of the last things. So anyway, they're very, very cool. Okay, number 4. If the people that you know had to describe you with one word, what word would that be for each of you?
This is like the newlywed game right now. Intense.
For you, Emma?
For me, solid.
That makes sense. Yeah, I could totally relate with that. That makes sense. And we have a whole podcast explaining why those 2 words make sense, right? So it's all good.
There you go.
All right. Number 5. What is one small thing that most people do not know about each of you?
I'm fairly active on social media as part of my business. And so I try not to overshare. So everything that I want out there in the public sphere is out there. There are certain things that are more private that I choose not to share. But things that I want people to know, I mean, you can get it there. I think if I had to pick things, I have lots and lots and lots of hobbies. And so because of that, sometimes people will be surprised because they're like, oh, I didn't know you sew, or I didn't know you speak French, or I didn't know you play the guitar, because I do lots and lots of things. I don't do any of them particularly expertly, but I do get really into them. And I like to pursue that down that rabbit hole of knowledge and skills. And so sometimes a lot of people will be surprised that I do this thing or that thing, but it's really just different hobbies and things that we've done over the years.
Very cool. What about you, Troy?
She gave me a lot of time to think about that. I feel like that's still enough time.
I can think of one thing most people don't know about you unless they knew you as a kid. His dad is the automotive professor at the college where we met. And so he grew up in the auto shop. And so that was kind of the basis of foundation of his handy knowledge. And he doesn't love working on cars, but being good with his hands, it translated into a lot of money for us when he learned how to do home improvement in our
study. For sure. That's the basis of a lot of your guys' success. Very cool.
To an extension of that, apparently I have this magic ability to where anything that's broken, if you just bring it near me, it fixes itself.
Yeah, we call him Harry Potter. Sometimes I just call him on the phone and the thing fixes.
We'd have like all of our developers in our office. We had to make an area for them to come in and sit in our office with us. And they would just come in, they would work on their computer, and then they would walk away. And we started asking them, like, why are you just coming in and out? And they're like, oh, well, I had something that wasn't working. And I knew that if I just came in here and start working again.
That's super cool. You have like a
It's
field
true.
going on. You got this field
Well,
dynamic, right? That's really cool.
I'm actually not that spiritual. I can't explain it, but it happens too often to be a coincidence. I don't know what
Yeah.
it is.
She shares an office with me. That's
Oh,
why.
there you go. So thank you guys. Yeah, no, this has been great having you on the show. I just had a blast like talking with you guys. And again, I saw so much of your guys' story in mine and some of the other couples that we've also had on our show. But before we go, why don't you guys tell the listeners a little bit more about how they can find out more about your guys' world?
The best way is our website. It's www.highrise.group, HIGHRISE.GROUP. And I'm super proud of this website because even though he's the IT guy, he made me do it by myself. So that website is 100% me. So if you go to that and /contact, it has links to all my socials. So you can choose to interact with me on the social network of your choice. It also has a place where you can sign up for a free phone call, 30-minute consult on my calendar. And it also has just my email and my phone number on there if you want to reach out. The best way to get a hold of me is that Calendly link, or to follow probably LinkedIn. And I do have a Facebook group for a passive investing club. I got a LinkedIn group too, but those are useless. But that Facebook passive investing group is where we post all of our events for our Monday night meetings. And we do meet once a month in person in Salt Lake City. So if you're anywhere in the area on that fourth Monday of the month, we'd love to have you come join us.
Excellent. That's awesome. And Troy, did you want to put anything out there, or is it all on Emma's website?
On my amazing website.
Yeah, on her
Yes.
amazing website.
Her amazing self-created website. Anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just be patient, communicate with each other, and just always strive to improve yourself. And you'll find that money and deals will flow to you as long as you are giving to everybody else.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. And a fantastic way to wrap up everything with the final word there. So thank you so much, Troy and Emma, for coming on the show. It's a pleasure having you guys on. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
Thank you. This was fun.
Yeah, this was really fun. Really, really fun. And for you listeners out there who have listened all the way to this point, I want to thank you as well for listening. And wherever you're watching or listening to this, please make sure that you thumbs up, you like, you subscribe, comment, engage with us. And please reach out to the amazing guests. That's right, absolutely. And the reason we ask that is because we want to fall into good favor with the algorithm gods. So that way we can get more exposure to more people, and we can also find ourselves with incredible guests just like Emma and Troy here, and continue to get more exposure to more people, add more value out there. So that being said, thank you once again, Emma and Troy, for coming on the show. It was a pleasure. And thank you for listening, dear listener. And we will see you again next time. This is Derek signing off.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you.